The gallows were being built in the center of Eagle Pass, Texas, and Delilah Andrews knew they were meant for her. She stood at the window of the makeshift jail, her hands gripping the iron bars until her knuckles turned white, watching the carpenter hammer another nail into the wooden structure. The sound echoed through the dusty street like a death knell, each strike a reminder that her past had finally caught up with her. It was April 1878, and the spring heat was already settling over the border town like a suffocating blanket. Delilah was 23 years old, and she had spent the last 5 years running from a crime she did not commit, only to be captured 3 days ago by a marshal who refused to listen to her pleas of innocence. The cell smelled of sweat and desperation. 2 other prisoners occupied the space with her, both men who kept their distance after the marshal made it clear she was accused of murder. Murder. The word tasted like ash in her mouth every time she thought about it. She had not killed anyone, but the evidence against her was damning. Her husband's blood on her dress, her fingerprints on the knife, her flight from Missouri in the dead of night. What the law did not know, what they refused to believe, was that her husband had been a monster. Thomas Andrews had beaten her regularly, broken her ribs twice, and threatened to kill her family if she ever left him. The night he died, he had come at her with that very knife, drunk and enraged because she had burned his supper. She had fought back, struggled, and then someone else had burst through the door. In the chaos and darkness, Thomas had fallen, the knife buried in his chest. Delilah had run, too terrified to stay and explain, too certain that no one would believe a woman over the reputation of a respected banker. Now, 5 years later, she wished she had stayed and faced the consequences. At least then she might have had a chance. Instead, she had lived like a ghost, moving from town to town, working under false names, always looking over her shoulder. She had been working as a seamstress in Eagle Pass for only 2 months when the marshal arrived with a wanted poster bearing a sketch that looked enough like her to seal her fate. "You should eat something," the marshal said, sliding a tin plate through the slot in her cell door. His name was Garrett, and he had the tired eyes of a man who had seen too much suffering, but had long since stopped caring about the stories behind the crimes. "I am not hungry," Delilah said, not turning from the window. "Suit yourself." His boots scraped against the floor as he walked away. She heard the main door open and close, and then there was silence except for the steady hammering outside. One of the other prisoners, a cattle rustler named Pete, cleared his throat. "They say hanging is quick if the rope is tied right," he offered, as if this were somehow comforting. Delilah finally turned from the window, her dark hair falling across her face. She had once been pretty, or so people had told her, but years of hardship had carved lines around her eyes and mouth that made her look older than her years. "I did not do what they say I did." Pete shrugged. "Most folks in here say that. I am telling the truth. Truth does not matter much when you have got a noose waiting for you." She sank onto the hard wooden bench that served as her bed, pressing her face into her hands. Pete was right. The truth had never mattered, not when her husband was alive, and certainly not now that he was dead. She had spent 5 years believing she did not deserve a second chance, that her fate was sealed the moment she ran instead of fighting for her innocence. Maybe the gallows were what she deserved after all, not for murder, but for being a coward. The door opened again, and this time the footsteps were different, heavier and more purposeful. Delilah looked up to see a man she did not recognize standing outside her cell. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the weathered look of someone who spent most of his life outdoors. His hat was pushed back on his head, revealing dark blonde hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. He wore a gun on his hip with the "You kill your husband?" he asked directly. "No." Her voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "But you ran." "I did." "Why?" Delilah stood, moving closer to the bars. Something about this man made her want to tell the truth, even though she had learned long ago that the truth was a luxury she could not afford. "Because he was going to kill me, and when someone else stopped him, I knew no one would believe me. I was right. No one did." The stranger tilted his head slightly. "Someone else killed him?" "Yes." "Who?" "I do not know. It was dark." He wore a bandana over his face. "He came through the door and fought with Thomas, and then Thomas fell and I ran. I should have stayed. I should have been braver, but I was so afraid." The words tumbled out of her like water from a broken dam, 5 years of silence breaking apart. "Why should I believe you?" the stranger asked, but his tone was curious rather than accusatory. "You should not," Delilah said bitterly. "No one else does. They are building gallows for me out there, and in a few days I will hang for a crime I did not commit. That is justice, apparently." Marshal Garrett shifted uncomfortably. "Now see here, Foley, this is not your concern. The lady had a fair trial in Missouri and was convicted in absentia. I am just transporting her back to face her sentence." So, the stranger's name was Foley. Delilah filed that information away, though she could not imagine why it mattered. "Convicted without being able to defend herself," Foley said. "That does not sound particularly fair to me, Marshal. The law is the law. The law is not always right." Garrett bristled. "Are you questioning my authority? I am questioning your rush to judgment." Foley turned his attention back to Delilah. "Tell me about your husband. What kind of man was he? In public, charming, successful, respected?" Delilah wrapped her arms around herself. "In private, a drunk who liked to use his fists on me when things did not go his way. He broke my ribs once because I smiled at another man at church. The other time, because I spent too much money on groceries. Anyone witnessed these beatings? His mother once walked in while he was hitting me. She told me I must have deserved it and that I should be a better wife." Foley's jaw tightened. "Did you tell anyone else? A doctor? A friend?" "I told our pastor. He said a wife's duty was to submit to her husband in all things, and that I should pray more." The old bitterness rose in her throat. No one wanted to believe that Thomas Andrews was anything other than the perfect gentleman he pretended to be. "But someone else knew," Foley said thoughtfully. "Someone who came to your house that night and killed him." "I have thought about it for 5 years," Delilah admitted. "I cannot imagine who it could have been. Thomas did not have enemies that I knew of. His business was successful. He was well liked." "Everyone has enemies," Foley said. He turned to the marshal. "I want to see the case file." "That is not possible." "Marshal Garrett, I am not asking as a curious citizen. I am asking as a Texas Ranger." Delilah's breath caught. A Texas Ranger. That explained the confidence and the air of authority. Garrett looked like he had swallowed something sour. "Even so, this is not Texas business. This is Missouri business. The woman is in Texas now, which makes it my business if I say it is." Foley's voice had gone hard. "You have got her scheduled to hang without a proper trial, based on a conviction handed down when she was not even present to defend herself. That does not sit right with me, so either you show me that case file, or I will wire the governor and ask him to intervene." The marshal and the ranger stared at each other for a long moment, and Delilah held her breath. Finally, Garrett sighed and walked to his desk, pulling out a folder stuffed with papers. He practically threw it at Foley. "There, read it. See that she is guilty. Then leave me to do my job." Foley caught the folder and began reading through it while standing right there in the jail. Delilah watched his face, trying to gauge his reactions, but he kept his expression carefully neutral. After what felt like an eternity, he looked up. "This is all circumstantial," he said. "Blood on her dress, which makes sense if she was in the room when he died. Her prints on the knife, which also makes sense if she handled it during a struggle. No witnesses to the actual killing, no confession. The only reason she was convicted was because she ran." "Running is evidence of guilt," Garrett said stubbornly. "Or evidence of fear." Foley closed the folder. "I have seen plenty of innocent people run because they were too scared to trust the system. And based on what I am reading here about Thomas Andrews' standing in the community, I cannot say I blame her for thinking no one would believe her." "So, what are you proposing?" Garrett asked irritably. "That I just let her go?" "No, I am proposing that I take her into my custody and investigate this case properly. If she is guilty, I will bring her back to face justice. If she is innocent, then we will find out who really killed Thomas Andrews." Delilah's heart leaped. "You believe me?" Foley turned those blue eyes on her again. "I believe you deserve a fair investigation, which you clearly did not get the first time around. Whether you are innocent or guilty, the truth matters." "The truth," she repeated softly. "I have been running so long, I almost forgot what that word meant." "Well, you are about to get reacquainted with it," Foley said. "Marshal, release her into my custody." "Absolutely not," Garrett said. "I have orders to transport her back to Missouri." And I have the authority as a Texas Ranger to supersede those orders if I believe an injustice is being done. Foley's hand rested casually on his gun, not threatening exactly, but making his position clear. Now, we can do this the easy way, where you release her to me and I take responsibility for her. Or we can do this the hard way, where I arrest you for obstruction of justice. Your choice, Marshal. Garrett's face turned red, but after a moment he pulled out his keys with jerky, angry movements. Fine, she is your problem now, but when she runs again, and she will, that is on you. She will not run, Foley said with certainty. How can you be so sure? Garrett demanded as he unlocked the cell door. Foley looked at Delilah as she stepped out into the main room of the jail, her legs shaky from 3 days of confinement. Because she is tired of running. Are you not, Miss Andrews? I am, Delilah whispered. I am so tired. Then it is settled. Foley offered her his arm like a gentleman escorting a lady to a dance rather than a ranger taking custody of a murder suspect. We have got a long road ahead of us, Miss Andrews. I hope you are ready for the truth, whatever it turns out to be. As they walked out of the jail into the bright Texas sunlight, Delilah blinked against the glare. The gallows stood half-finished in the town square, a grim reminder of how close she had come to the end. But now, somehow, impossibly, she had been given a reprieve. Why are you doing this? She asked as they walked toward a horse hitched outside the general store. You do not know me. You do not owe me anything. Foley untied his horse, a sturdy chestnut mare, and turned to face her. My mother was beaten by my father for years before he finally drank himself to death. She never ran, but she should have. She died when I was 15, worn down and used up by a man who was supposed to love her. So, when I hear about a woman accused of killing a man who beat her, I am inclined to listen to her story before I judge her. The simple honesty in his words made Delilah's throat tighten. I am sorry about your mother. So am I. He swung up into the saddle and then offered her his hand. Come on, we are riding to San Antonio. I have got some contacts there who might be able to help us. San Antonio is 2 days away, Delilah said, taking his hand and letting him pull her up behind him. She had to sit very close, her arms wrapping around his waist to keep from falling. She could feel the solid strength of him, the warmth of his body through his shirt. 2 days gives us plenty of time to talk, Foley said. I want to know everything about Thomas Andrews, your marriage, and that night. Every detail you can remember, no matter how small. I have tried to forget most of it, Delilah admitted as they started riding out of Eagle Pass. I know, but now it is time to remember. They rode in silence for a while, leaving the town behind. The landscape stretched out before them, all brown earth and scrub brush, and endless sky. Delilah had almost forgotten what it felt like to be outside, to feel the wind on her face and the sun on her shoulders. Even though she was still technically a prisoner, for the first time in 5 years, she felt something that might have been hope stirring in her chest. What is your first name? She asked after they had been riding for an hour. Or should I just call you Ranger Foley? Sebastian, he said. Sebastian Foley. My friends call me Sebastian. Are we friends? I suppose that depends on whether you are telling me the truth. I am. She tightened her grip around his waist as the horse navigated a rocky stretch. I know you have no reason to believe me, but I swear on everything I hold dear that I am telling the truth. I did not kill Thomas. Then we will prove it, Sebastian said simply, as if it were the easiest thing in the world. They made camp that night beside a creek, the water gurgling softly over smooth stones. Sebastian built a fire while Delilah sat on a fallen log, watching him work. He moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times, gathering wood and striking flint until flames flickered to life. He pulled food from his saddlebags, hardtack and jerky, and a tin of peaches that he opened with his knife. Not exactly a feast, he said, handing her a share, but it will keep us alive. It is more than I had in that cell, Delilah said, biting into the jerky. It was tough and salty, but she was hungry enough not to care. They ate in companionable silence, and then Sebastian pulled out a small notebook and pencil. All right, start from the beginning. When did you marry Thomas Andrews? And so Delilah told him everything. She talked until her voice grew hoarse, dredging up memories she had tried so hard to bury. She told him about meeting Thomas when she was 18, how charming and attentive he had been during their courtship, how her parents had been so pleased that a successful banker wanted to marry their daughter, how everything had changed after the wedding when Thomas's mask slipped and she saw the man underneath. She described the first time he hit her, how shocked she had been, how he had apologized and cried and promised it would never happen again. She told Sebastian about the cycles of violence and remorse, how Thomas would beat her and then bring her flowers, how he isolated her from her friends and family until she felt completely alone. "Why did you not leave earlier?" Sebastian asked, his pencil pausing on the page. "Where would I have gone? My parents thought he was wonderful. The law would not have helped me. A wife's property belongs to her husband, and I had nothing of my own. And Thomas always said that if I tried to leave, he would kill my family." She wrapped her arms around herself, despite the warmth of the fire. "I believed him. He was capable of anything when he was angry." Sebastian's jaw was tight as he wrote. "Tell me about that night." Delilah closed her eyes, forcing herself back to that terrible evening. It was November. Cold. Thomas came home drunk, which was becoming more and more common. I had made dinner, but I had let the roast cook too long and it was tough. He threw his plate against the wall and started shouting at me, called me worthless, stupid, said I could not even manage simple tasks. And then, he grabbed me by the hair and dragged me to the kitchen. He picked up the carving knife and held it to my throat, said maybe he should just slit my throat and find a wife who could actually cook. I was so scared I could not even scream. The memories were vivid now, every detail sharp as broken glass. I managed to get away from him, ran for the front door, but he caught me. We struggled. He still had the knife. And then the door crashed open and someone burst in. Describe him. Tall, wearing dark clothes and a bandana over his face. I could only see his eyes. Brown eyes, I think, but everything was happening so fast. She pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to remember. He grabbed Thomas, pulled him off me. They fought. Thomas still had the knife. There was shouting. Crashing, they knocked over the hall table. And then Thomas made this awful sound and fell down. The stranger looked at me for just a second, and then he ran out the back door. I knelt beside Thomas, and he was already dead, the knife in his chest. There was so much blood. What did you do? I panicked. Thomas's mother lived next door, and I knew she would be coming to see what the noise was about. I knew she would blame me, so I grabbed some money from Thomas's desk and I ran. I ran and I kept running. Delilah opened her eyes, finding Sebastian watching her with an unreadable expression. I have regretted it every day since, but I was so afraid, and I thought it was my only choice. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. Finally, he said, "Someone came to that house specifically to kill your husband. The question is why? I do not know. Did Thomas have any business rivals? Anyone who might have wanted him dead? Not that I knew of, but Thomas kept his business separate from his home life. He never discussed his work with me. What about debts? Gambling? Women?" Delilah shook her head. "I do not think so. Thomas was obsessed with his reputation. Everything he did was calculated to make him look good in the community. Then we need to dig deeper into his business dealings. Men like Thomas Andrews, men who present a perfect face to the world, often have secrets." Sebastian closed his notebook. "When we get to San Antonio, I am going to wire some contacts in Missouri. See what they can find out about your husband's finances and associates." "You really think there is a chance I could be proven innocent?" Delilah asked, hardly daring to believe it. "I think there is more to this story than what is in that case file," Sebastian said, "and I will not rest until I find out what really happened." They sat together by the fire as the stars came out overhead, scattered across the black velvet sky like diamonds. Delilah had not felt this safe in years, not since before she married Thomas. It was strange that she should feel safe with a man she had only just met, a man who was essentially her captor. But something about Sebastian Foley made her trust him in a way she had not trusted anyone in a very long time. "Why did you become a Texas Ranger?" she asked softly. "Same reason most men do, I suppose. Wanted to make a difference. Wanted to bring justice to places where the law was too weak or too corrupt to reach." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling up into the darkness. "And maybe I wanted to be the kind of man who could help people like my mother, people who had no one else to turn to." "That is a good reason," Delilah said. "What about you? What did you want before you married Thomas Andrews?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her what she wanted in so long that she had almost forgotten. "I wanted to be a teacher," she said finally. "I loved reading, loved learning, I thought maybe I could run a school someday, help children discover the world through books. That is not a bad dream. It was a foolish dream. Women like me do not get to be teachers. Women like you? Sebastian turned to look at her, his face half in shadow. What does that mean? Poor women? Women without connections or education beyond what their mothers taught them. Women who have to marry whoever will have them, because that is the only future available. She laughed bitterly. I thought Thomas was my chance at a better life. Instead, he was my prison. You are only 23, Sebastian said. You have got plenty of time to make a different future for yourself. If I do not hang first, you will not hang. I promise you that. You cannot promise that, Delilah said. You do not know how this will end. No, but I know that I will do everything in my power to find the truth, and I am very good at what I do, Miss Andrews. There was no arrogance in his words, just simple confidence. Delilah found herself believing him, even though every experience she had taught her that trusting men only led to pain. They spread out their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. Sebastian gave Delilah his extra blanket without her asking, noticing how she shivered in the cooling night air. She wrapped herself in it gratefully, breathing in the scent of leather and wood smoke and something uniquely him. Sebastian, she said into the darkness. Yes? Thank you for believing me, for giving me a chance. You said earlier that you did not deserve a second chance, he said. But the way I see it, you never got a first real chance. Everything was stacked against you from the beginning. A violent husband, a community that refused to see the truth, a legal system that convicted you without hearing your side of the story. So, this is not a second chance, Miss Andrews. This is your first real one. Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. She turned her face away so he would not see, but she could not stop the quiet sob that escaped her throat. For 5 years she had carried the weight of guilt and shame, believing that she was a coward and a failure. But Sebastian saw it differently. He saw that she had been a victim long before she became a fugitive. Good night, Sebastian, she whispered when she could trust her voice again. Good night, Delilah. It was the first time he had used her first name, and somehow that small intimacy felt like the beginning of something she did not yet have words for. They reached San Antonio late the following afternoon, the city sprawling out before them, with its mix of Spanish architecture and frontier buildings. The streets were busy with people, horses, and wagons, a stark contrast to the quiet isolation of the trail. Sebastian guided his horse to a hotel near the plaza and helped Delilah dismount. We will get 2 rooms, he said. You will stay in yours while I make some inquiries. I need you to trust me and not run. I told you I was done running, Delilah said. I meant it. He studied her face for a moment and then nodded. I believe you. The hotel was modest but clean. Sebastian paid for the rooms and then escorted Delilah to hers, a small space with a bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. After days of sleeping on the ground and weeks before that in a cell, it looked like paradise. Lock the door behind me, Sebastian said. I will bring you dinner later. True to his word, he returned a few hours later with food from the restaurant downstairs. They ate together in her room, sitting at the small table by the window. Sebastian had washed the trail dust from his face and changed his shirt, and Delilah found herself noticing things about him she had been too frightened to notice before. The strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled slightly, the gentle way he moved despite his size and obvious strength. I sent telegrams to Missouri, he said between bites of roasted chicken, to the sheriff in Jefferson City and to a private investigator I know. Asked them to look into Thomas Andrews' business dealings, specifically any financial troubles or conflicts in the months before his death. How long will it take to get a response? Delilah asked. A few days, maybe a week. In the meantime, I want you to write down everything you can remember about Thomas's associates, names, descriptions, anything you overheard him say about his work. There is not much. He really did keep me separate from that part of his life. Write down what you do know. Sometimes the smallest detail can break a case open. After he left, Delilah sat at the table with paper and pencil and tried to remember. She wrote about the few times Thomas had entertained business associates at their home, the names she could recall, the snatches of conversation she had overheard while serving dinner. She wrote about his banker friends, about the church elders who had been his companions. She wrote until her hand cramped and the candle burned low. The next few days fell into a pattern. Sebastian would leave each morning to follow leads and send more telegrams, and Delilah would stay in her room, writing and remembering and slowly piecing together the fragments of her past. He brought her meals and sat with her in the evenings, telling her about his day and listening to her thoughts. Slowly, carefully, they were building something between them, a fragile trust that felt precious and terrifying all at once. On the fourth day, Sebastian came to her room with a telegram in his hand and excitement in his eyes. "We have got something," he said, sitting down across from her. Thomas Andrews was not as successful as everyone thought. He was embezzling money from the bank where he worked, small amounts at first, but increasingly larger sums in the months before his death. The bank discovered the theft a week before he died, but they kept it quiet to avoid a scandal. Delilah's eyes widened. He was stealing? Quite a bit, apparently. Nearly $10,000 over the course of 2 years. I had no idea. He never said anything about money troubles. He would not have. Men like Thomas are good at keeping up appearances even when everything is falling apart. Sebastian tapped the telegram thoughtfully. But here's the interesting part. The bank president, a man named Charles Whitmore, confronted Thomas privately and gave him 2 weeks to return the money or face criminal charges. You think Whitmore killed him? I think it is a strong possibility. If Thomas could not pay back what he stole, Whitmore would have lost his position for not catching the embezzlement sooner. Killing Thomas and making it look like his wife did it would have solved his problem neatly. Delilah felt hope flare in her chest, bright and painful. "Can you prove it?" "Not yet, but I'm going to keep digging." He reached across the table and took her hand, a gesture that surprised them both. His hand was warm and calloused, strong but gentle. "This is going to work out, Delilah. I can feel it." She looked down at their joined hands, at the way his thumb was brushing gently over her knuckles. Something shifted inside her, a wall she had built around her heart starting to crack. She had spent 5 years believing she could never trust a man again, that all men were like Thomas. But Sebastian was different. He listened to her. He believed her. He fought for her when no one else would. "I am starting to believe you," she whispered. His eyes met hers, and the air between them seemed to thicken. For a moment, she thought he might lean across the table and kiss her, and she realized with a start that she wanted him to. But instead, he squeezed her hand gently and then released it, standing up. "I need to send more telegrams, but tonight, I thought maybe we could take a walk. You have been cooped up in this room for days. Some fresh air might do you good." "I would like that," Delilah said. That evening, Sebastian escorted her through the plaza as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was warm and filled with the sounds of the city settling into evening. Guitar music drifting from a cantina, the laughter of children playing in the street, the clip-clop of horses' hooves on cobblestones. They walked slowly, not talking much, just enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. Delilah felt eyes on them occasionally, curious glances from passers-by, and she realized they must make an interesting pair. A rough frontier ranger and a woman in a worn dress that had seen better days, walking arm in arm like courting sweethearts. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian asked. "How strange this is," Delilah admitted. "A week ago, I was waiting to hang. Now I'm walking through San Antonio with a man who is trying to prove my innocence. It feels like a dream. It is not a dream, it is real, and it is not over yet." He guided her to a bench near a fountain, and they sat together watching the water cascade over stone. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. When this is over, when we prove you are innocent and clear your name, what will you do?" Delilah had not let herself think that far ahead. The future had been a closed door for so long. "I do not know. I suppose I will try to rebuild my life somehow. Maybe go somewhere no one knows me and start fresh." "What about teaching? You said that was your dream." "That was the dream of a naive girl who did not know how cruel the world could be." "Maybe," Sebastian said. "Or maybe it was the dream of a brave woman who deserves a chance to make it come true." She turned to look at him, this unexpected man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had been too afraid to say out loud. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" "Because you deserve someone to care," he said simply. "And because the more time I spend with you, the more I realize you are one of the strongest people I have ever met. You survived a marriage that should have killed you. You survived 5 years on the run with the law chasing you. You never gave up, even when you thought you did not deserve a chance. That is not weakness. Delilah, that is strength. Tears welled in her eyes. I do not feel strong. You do not have to feel it for it to be true. He reached up and gently wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek, his touch sending warmth spreading through her. And I am going to make sure the world knows the truth about what happened to you. I promise. They sat by the fountain until stars began to appear overhead, talking about everything and nothing. Sebastian told her about growing up on a ranch in West Texas, about learning to ride before he could walk, about the day his mother died and how it changed him. Delilah told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her younger sister who had died of fever when they were children, about the books she had loved to read. It was the kind of conversation two people have when they are falling in love, though neither of them would have named it that yet. They were still too cautious, too aware of the circumstances that had brought them together. But something was growing between them, tender and hopeful, like the first green shoots after a long winter. When they returned to the hotel, Sebastian walked her to her door. They stood in the hallway, neither wanting to part. Thank you for tonight, Delilah said, for treating me like a person instead of a prisoner. You are not my prisoner, Sebastian said. You never were. Then what am I? He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke his voice was low and intense. You are someone I am beginning to care about very much. Before she could respond, before she could examine the sudden racing of her heart, he touched his hand to his hat in a gesture of farewell and walked down the hall to his own room, leaving Delilah standing there with her fingers pressed to her lips and emotions she could not name swirling through her chest. The next week brought a flurry of activity. More telegrams arrived, each one adding another piece to the puzzle. Sebastian's investigator in Missouri had interviewed people who knew Thomas Andrews, and a picture was emerging of a man who gambled more than anyone knew, who had debts he could not pay, who had been desperate in the weeks before his death. Charles Whitmore, the bank president, had disappeared from Jefferson City 2 days after Thomas's death, claiming he needed to visit relatives in the East. But no one had heard from him since, and his family insisted they had not seen him. He ran, Sebastian said, spreading papers across the table in Delilah's room, just like you did. Only he had something to hide. But how do we prove he killed Thomas? Delilah asked. We need to find him, and I think I know where he went. Sebastian pointed to a note in the file. Whitmore had family in New Orleans. If he went east, that is the most likely place. New Orleans is hundreds of miles away. I know, but if we can find him, if we can get him to confess, we can clear your name completely. Sebastian looked at her seriously. It will mean more traveling, more time on the trail. Are you willing to do that? Delilah did not hesitate. Yes, I want the truth to come out, whatever it takes. They left San Antonio the next morning, heading southeast toward the Louisiana border. It would take them nearly 2 weeks to reach New Orleans, traveling through rough country and small towns. Sebastian bought supplies and a horse for Delilah, a gentle bay mare that seemed to sense her nervousness and moved patiently beneath her. Riding side by side across the Texas plains, Delilah felt a freedom she had not experienced in years. The sun on her face, the wind in her hair, the wide open sky stretching forever in every direction. She was still technically a fugitive, still facing possible execution if Sebastian could not prove her innocence. But somehow, with him beside her, she felt more alive than she had in a very long time. They talked as they rode, sharing stories and dreams. Sebastian told her about the ranch he wanted to buy someday, a place where he could raise horses and maybe start a family. Delilah talked about the school she had always imagined, small and welcoming, where every child would be encouraged to learn at their own pace. You should do it, Sebastian said. When this is over, you should start that school. It takes money to start a school. I do not have anything. You have a dream. That is more than most people have. The rest can be figured out. As the days passed, they grew more comfortable with each other. They rode close together, their legs occasionally brushing. When they made camp at night, they sat near each other by the fire, shoulders touching. Small intimacies that spoke of growing affection, though neither had yet spoken of the feelings that were clearly developing between them. One night, about a week into their journey, they camped beside a river swollen with spring rains. The air was humid and thick, so different from the dry heat of West Texas. Delilah washed her face and hands in the river, grateful for the cool water. And when she returned to camp, She found Sebastian standing very still, staring into the trees. "What is it?" she asked quietly. "We are being followed," he said, his hand resting on his gun. "I spotted tracks this morning. 2 riders, maybe 3. They have been keeping their distance but staying on our trail." Fear prickled down Delilah's spine. "Who do you think it is? Could be anyone. Outlaws looking for easy prey. Or it could be someone who knows who you are and wants the reward." There was a reward for her capture, she knew, though she tried not to think about it. Either way, we need to be careful. They took turns keeping watch that night, and Delilah barely slept during her rest periods. Every sound made her jump. Every rustle in the bushes made her heart race. When dawn finally came, gray and misty, she was exhausted but relieved to see Sebastian moving about camp, building up the fire for breakfast. "Did you see anything?" she asked. "No, but they are still out there. I can feel it." He handed her a tin cup of coffee. "We are going to change our route today. There is a town about 10 miles south of here. We will stop there, resupply, and see if we can lose whoever is following us." The town was called Riverside, a small settlement that seemed to consist mostly of a general store, a saloon, and a church. They rode in carefully, Sebastian's eyes constantly scanning the street for threats. They tied their horses outside the general store and went inside to buy supplies. The proprietor, an older man with shrewd eyes, looked at them with obvious curiosity. "You folks passing through?" "That is right," Sebastian said. "Just need some provisions." "You are a ranger, are you not?" The man gestured to the badge barely visible on Sebastian's vest. "Do not see many rangers this far east." "Ranger business," Sebastian said shortly, clearly not wanting to discuss it. But the man's eyes had shifted to Delilah, and recognition flickered across his face. "Say, you would not happen to be Delilah Andrews, would you? There is a wanted poster for a woman looks just like you." Delilah's blood ran cold. Before she could speak, Sebastian stepped forward. "This woman is in my custody, and I will thank you to keep that information to yourself. I am investigating her case, and I do not need trouble from bounty hunters or vigilantes." The proprietor held up his hands. "No trouble from me, Ranger, just making an observation." They gathered their supplies quickly and left, but the damage was done. As they mounted their horses, Delilah saw faces peering out from windows, people watching with interest. Word would spread. Their followers would know exactly where they were. "We need to leave now," Sebastian said, his voice urgent, "and we need to move fast." They rode hard for hours, pushing the horses to the edge of their endurance. But as the sun began to set, they heard what they had been dreading, the sound of hoofbeats behind them, getting closer. "There!" Sebastian pointed to a rocky outcropping ahead. "We can make a stand there." They urged their tired horses up the slope and took cover behind the rocks. Sebastian pulled his rifle from its scabbard and checked his ammunition. Delilah had no weapon, so she crouched behind a large boulder and tried to control her racing heart. 3 riders came into view, rough-looking men with guns drawn. They reined in their horses about 50 yards away. "We know you are up there, Ranger," one of them shouted. "Send out the woman, and we will let you live." "She is in my custody," Sebastian shouted back. "She is under the protection of the Texas Rangers." "That reward is good for dead or alive," another man yelled. "Makes no difference to us." "It will make a difference when you are charged with murder and obstruction of justice." Sebastian's voice was hard as iron. "You boys need to turn around and ride away before this gets ugly." 3 against 1, the first man laughed. "I like our odds." "You are forgetting something," Sebastian said, and Delilah heard the deadly calm in his voice. "I am a Texas Ranger. You think I have not faced worse odds than this?" For a moment, there was silence. Then one of the men made the mistake of reaching for his gun. Sebastian's rifle cracked, and the man yelped, his gun flying from his hand. The shot had been perfectly placed to disarm without killing. "Next one goes through your heart," Sebastian warned. "Now get out of here." The men looked at each other, clearly reassessing the situation. Wounded pride battled with self-preservation. Finally, the man Sebastian had shot clutched his bleeding hand and snarled, "This is not over, Ranger." "Yes, it is," Sebastian said, "because if I see any of you again, I will not aim for your hand. Now ride." They rode, disappearing into the gathering darkness. Sebastian waited until he was sure they were gone, before lowering his rifle and turning to Delilah. "Are you all right?" he asked. She was shaking, but she nodded. "That was too close." "I know, but we cannot stay here. We need to keep moving, at least until we are sure they are not coming back. He helped her to her feet, his hand steadying her. Can you ride a while longer? I will do whatever I need to do. They rode through the night, only stopping when they found a sheltered spot in a grove of trees. By then, both of them were swaying with exhaustion. They made a cold camp, not daring to light a fire that might give away their position, and huddled together under blankets. I am sorry, Delilah whispered into the darkness. This is my fault. If you were not helping me, you would not be in danger. Stop, Sebastian said firmly. He shifted so he could see her face in the starlight. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. Not Thomas beating you, not someone killing him, not the law treating you like a criminal. You are a victim, Delilah, not a villain. Then why do I feel so guilty all the time? Because that is what abuse does. It makes you think everything is your fault, that you deserve the pain. But you do not. You never did. He reached out and took her hand. And I am not going to let anyone hurt you again. That is a promise. She believed him. Looking into his eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand around hers, she believed him completely. And in that moment, something shifted between them, the last barriers falling away. Sebastian, she said softly. Yes? I think I am falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, brave and terrifying. For a long moment he did not respond, and Delilah felt panic rising. She had said too much, revealed too much. She started to pull her hand away, but he held on. I know I am falling in love with you, he said finally. I have been since that first day in the jail, when you looked at me with so much pain and strength in your eyes. I told myself I needed to stay professional, to keep my distance. But I cannot stop thinking about you, Delilah. I cannot stop wanting to protect you and make you happy. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I did not think I could ever feel this way again. After Thomas, I thought I would never trust a man enough to love him. I am not Thomas, Sebastian said. I will never be Thomas. I will never raise my hand to you in anger. I will never try to control you or diminish you. If you give me your heart, I will treasure it like the precious gift it is. I am giving it to you, Delilah whispered. It is already yours. He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but she did not move. When his lips touched hers, gentle and questioning, it was nothing like the rough, demanding kisses Thomas had forced on her. This was tender, respectful, full of promise rather than possession. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and steady beneath her palms. The kiss deepened, becoming more passionate, but never losing its gentleness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a short time. But I love you, Delilah Andrews, and I want a future with you. I love you too, she said, laughing through her tears. And I want that future more than anything. They held each other through the rest of the night, talking softly, stealing kisses, making promises. And when dawn came, gray and uncertain, they faced it together, ready for whatever lay ahead. The journey to New Orleans took another week. They traveled carefully, avoiding main roads and staying away from towns where Delilah might be recognized. The closer they got to Louisiana, the more the landscape changed. The dry plains gave way to humid forests, the air thick with moisture and the smell of growing things. New Orleans itself was unlike anything Delilah had ever seen. The city sprawled along the Mississippi River, a chaotic mix of French and Spanish and American influences. The streets were narrow and crowded, filled with people speaking a dozen different languages. Music spilled from doorways, and the air smelled of spices and river water, and something indefinably exotic. Sebastian found them rooms in a boarding house in the French Quarter, and then set about tracking down Charles Whitmore. It took 3 days of visiting banks and asking careful questions, but finally he found what he was looking for. He is here, Sebastian told Delilah, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Using a false name and working as a clerk at a shipping company. I have been watching him. He is definitely our man. What do we do now? Delilah asked. We confront him. Tomorrow night he walks home from work along the river. We will intercept him and get the truth. The next evening they waited in the shadows near the docks, watching as workers streamed out of the shipping office. Charles Whitmore appeared right on schedule, a nondescript man in his 50s, his suit a bit shabby, his shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. Sebastian stepped out in front of him, blocking his path. "Mr. Whitmore, or should I say Mr. Wilson?" Whitmore froze, his face draining of color. "I do not know what you are talking about. I am Sebastian Foley, Texas Ranger, and I think you know exactly what I am talking about." Sebastian gestured, and Delilah stepped out of the shadows. "You remember Delilah Andrews, do not you? The woman you framed for murder?" Whitmore looked at Delilah, and his expression crumbled. "Oh God," he whispered. "Start talking," Sebastian said. "Tell us what happened the night Thomas Andrews died." For a moment it seemed like Whitmore might run, but then he sagged, all the fight going out of him. "I did not mean to kill him," he said brokenly. "I just wanted him to pay back the money. He was going to ruin me, ruin the bank. I went to his house to reason with him one last time." "And?" Sebastian prompted. "I heard fighting inside. When I opened the door, he was attacking his wife with a knife. I could not just stand there and watch. I pulled him off her and we fought. The knife, it went into him. I did not mean to." Whitmore looked at Delilah with haunted eyes. "I am sorry. I should have stayed, should have told the truth. But I panicked, and when the law blamed you, I thought maybe I could escape. I have been living in hell ever since, looking over my shoulder, unable to sleep." "You let an innocent woman take the blame," Sebastian said harshly. I know, and I will have to live with that for the rest of my life." Whitmore straightened his shoulders. "What are you going to do?" "You are going to write out a full confession," Sebastian said. "Every detail, and then you are going to sign it in front of witnesses. That confession is going to clear Delilah's name and bring you to justice." Whitmore nodded slowly. "All right. It is time this ended. Past time." They went to the police station, where Sebastian explained the situation to the local sheriff. Whitmore wrote out his confession, his hand shaking, tears running down his face as he described how Thomas Andrews' death had actually happened. It matched Delilah's account almost exactly. When it was done, when the confession was signed and witnessed, Delilah felt like she could finally breathe. 5 years of running, 5 years of fear and guilt and shame were over. She was innocent. The law would know she was innocent. Sebastian arranged for copies of the confession to be sent to Missouri, along with his own report as a Texas Ranger. It would take time for the legal system to officially clear her name, but the truth was finally out. They left Whitmore in the custody of the New Orleans police and walked out into the warm night. Delilah felt dizzy with relief and joy and 100 other emotions. When they were alone, Sebastian pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "It is over," he murmured into her hair. "You are free." "I am free," she repeated, testing the words. They felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. "What do you want to do now?" Sebastian asked, pulling back to look at her face. "I want to go home with you," Delilah said, "wherever home is." "Are you sure? You could go anywhere now, start that school you always wanted." "I could start a school anywhere," she pointed out, "including wherever you are." He grinned, that slow smile that made her heart flutter. "I like the sound of that. Come on, let us go make some plans." They returned to Texas, stopping first in Eagle Pass to inform Marshal Garrett of what had happened. The marshal was grudging in his acceptance of Delilah's innocence, but he had no choice but to acknowledge the evidence. From there, they traveled to San Antonio, where Sebastian had official ranger business to attend to. While he was working, Delilah explored the city, marveling at how different everything looked now that she was free. She was not looking over her shoulder anymore, not jumping at every shadow. One afternoon, she was browsing in a bookshop when Sebastian found her, his face alight with excitement. "I have something to show you," he said. He took her to a property on the outskirts of town, a large piece of land with a sturdy house and several outbuildings. "It used to be a ranch," Sebastian explained, "but the owners moved east and now it is for sale. I have been saving my pay for years, and I have enough for the down payment." "It is beautiful," Delilah said, looking around at the rolling hills and the distant mountains. "That is not all." He pointed to a smaller building set apart from the main house. "That was a bunkhouse, but it could be converted. It could be a schoolhouse." Delilah's breath caught. "You are serious." "I am very serious." He took her hands. "I want to buy this place, Delilah. I want to make it our home. And if you still want to teach, I want to help you start that school. We could build something good here together." "Our home," she repeated softly. I have not had a real home in so long." "Then let me give you one." He dropped to one knee right there in the dusty yard, still holding her hands. "Delilah Andrews, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and the mother of my children? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you deserve every happiness?" She was crying now, happy tears that blurred her vision. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, yes." He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until they were both laughing and dizzy. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, right there in the open where anyone could see. And Delilah did not care. She was free, she was loved, she was home. They were married a month later in the small church in San Antonio. It was a simple ceremony, with only a handful of friends in attendance. Delilah wore a dress she had sewn herself, pale blue cotton with lace at the collar. Sebastian wore his best suit, his hair combed back, his eyes shining with love, as he watched her walk down the aisle toward him. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Sebastian kissed her gently, reverently, and Delilah felt the last of her old fears melt away. This was nothing like her first marriage. This was partnership, respect, love in its truest form. They moved into the ranch house and spent the summer making it their own. Sebastian taught Delilah to ride better, and they explored their property together, making plans for where to build corrals and plant gardens. Delilah worked on converting the old bunkhouse into a schoolhouse, painting the walls cheerful colors and building shelves for books. In August, she put up a notice in town. "School opening in September, all children welcome." She did not know if anyone would come, but on the first day of school, 8 children arrived, ranging in age from 6 to 14, their parents cautiously hopeful that this new teacher might offer their children something better. Delilah loved teaching even more than she had imagined. She loved watching her students' faces light up when they mastered a new concept, loved helping them discover the worlds that lived inside books. Sebastian would often stop by during the day, leaning in the doorway and watching her with such pride and affection that it made her heart swell. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk about their days, making plans for the future. They wanted children of their own, wanted to fill the house with noise and laughter. And in the spring of 1879, Delilah discovered she was pregnant. The pregnancy was not easy. She was sick in the mornings and tired all the time. But Sebastian was endlessly patient, taking over more of the ranch work so she could rest, rubbing her swollen feet at night, bringing her tea and crackers when her stomach rebelled. "I hope it is a boy," she said one evening as they sat together, his hand resting on her rounded belly. "I just hope it is healthy," Sebastian said. "Boy or girl, I will be happy." Their son was born in November, a difficult labor that lasted nearly 20 hours. But when Sebastian finally placed the squalling infant in Delilah's arms, all the pain was forgotten. He was perfect, with dark hair like his mother and blue eyes like his father. "Samuel," Delilah said softly. "Let us name him Samuel." "Samuel Foley," Sebastian said, running a gentle finger down his son's tiny cheek. "Welcome to the world, little man." Watching Sebastian with their son, Delilah felt a completeness she had never known was possible. This man who had saved her life, who had believed in her when no one else would, who had given her a chance at happiness, was now the father of her child. It seemed almost too good to be true, but it was true. It was real, and it was theirs. The years passed in a blur of joy and hard work. The school grew, with more families sending their children as word spread about the quality of education Delilah provided. Sebastian built a larger schoolhouse, and Delilah hired an assistant teacher to help manage the growing number of students. Their family grew too. 2 years after Samuel was born, they welcomed a daughter they named Emma. She had her father's smile and her mother's determination. And 3 years after that, another son, Thomas, named not after Delilah's first husband, but after Sebastian's brother, who had died young. The ranch prospered as well. Sebastian proved to be as skilled at raising horses as he was at everything else. Their animals were known throughout Texas for their quality and temperament. They were building a legacy, something that would outlast them both. Sometimes, late at night when the children were asleep, and they sat together on the porch listening to the crickets sing, Delilah would think about how different her life could have been. If Sebastian had not walked into that jail in Eagle Pass, if he had not believed her story, if he had not cared enough to fight for her innocence. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian would ask, as if he could read her thoughts. How lucky I am, she would always answer. And he would pull her close and kiss her temple and say, I am the lucky one. In 1885, when Delilah was 30 years old, she received a letter from Missouri. The governor had issued an official pardon, formally exonerating her of all charges related to her husband's death. It was a symbolic gesture more than anything, since Sebastian's investigation had already cleared her name years earlier. But it felt important somehow, a final closing of that dark chapter of her life. She showed the letter to Sebastian, and they read it together by lamplight. How does it feel? He asked. Like I can finally let go of the past completely, Delilah said. I have been happy here, happier than I ever thought possible. But there was always a small part of me that held back, afraid it could all be taken away. Now I know it cannot. I am truly free. You have always been free, Sebastian said, from the moment you stepped out of that jail with me. No, Delilah said, from the moment you told me I deserved a first real chance instead of a second chance. That is when everything changed. That is when I started believing I could have a different life. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch as gentle as it had been that first night by the river when he told her he was falling in love with her. I meant every word I said that day, and I mean it now when I say I love you more than anything in this world. I love you too, she whispered. You saved my life, Sebastian. No, he said. You saved your own life by being strong enough to survive. I just gave you the chance to show everyone else how strong you are. They kissed, a long, slow kiss full of years of love and partnership and shared dreams. When they broke apart, Delilah tucked the pardon letter away in her desk. She did not need it to know who she was anymore. She was Delilah Foley, beloved wife, devoted mother, respected teacher. She was a woman who had survived hell and come out stronger on the other side. The children grew up surrounded by love and possibility. Samuel became a lawyer, fighting for justice just like his father had done. Emma became a doctor, one of the first women physicians in Texas. Thomas took over the ranch, expanding it and making it even more successful. And through it all, Delilah and Sebastian remained the center of their family, the example of what love should be. They grew old together, their hair turning gray, their faces lining with age. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, becoming richer and more profound with each passing year. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch to celebrate. The house was full of noise and laughter, 3 generations coming together to honor the love that had started it all. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Delilah and Sebastian walked out to their favorite spot, a hill overlooking the ranch where they could see for miles. The stars were brilliant overhead, scattered across the sky like diamonds. Oh, 30 years, Delilah said, leaning against her husband's shoulder. Can you believe it? It has gone by in a heartbeat, Sebastian said, though I remember every moment. Even that first day in the jail, especially that first day, I took one look at you and knew you were going to change my life. I was so scared, Delilah admitted. I had given up hope, and then you walked in and told me I deserved a first real chance. And you took it, Sebastian said. You grabbed onto that chance with both hands and built something beautiful. Look at what we have created, Delilah. Look at our family, our school, our life. This is all because you were brave enough to believe in yourself. We did this together, she corrected. I could not have done any of it without you. Then we are both lucky, he said, kissing her softly. Lucky to have found each other. Lucky to have been given the chance to build this life. They stood there together on the hill, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Below them, the ranch was dark and peaceful, the house where their children and grandchildren slept safe and warm. The school stood silent, waiting for Monday morning when it would fill with eager students again. This was their legacy. Not just the land or the buildings, but the love that had made it all possible. A love that had started in the darkest of circumstances and bloomed into something beautiful and enduring. Delilah thought about the woman she had been, standing at that jail window watching the gallows being built. That woman had believed she did not deserve a second chance, had believed her story was over. But Sebastian had shown her the truth. It had not been a second chance at all. It had been her first real chance, her first opportunity to choose her own path and become the person she was meant to be. And she had chosen love. She had chosen hope. She had chosen life. "Thank you," she whispered to her husband. "For what?" "For everything. For believing in me, for fighting for me, for loving me." "Thank you for letting me," Sebastian said, "for trusting me with your heart, for giving me the greatest gift of my life." They walked back to the house hand in hand, the same way they had walked through life for 30 years, together, equal partners, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and refused to let go. Inside the house, their oldest grandchild, a girl of 7, was still awake. She ran to them as they entered. "Grandma, Grandpa, tell us a story," she begged. "It is late, sweetheart," Delilah said. "You should be asleep. Please, just one story." Sebastian and Delilah exchanged a smile. "All right," Delilah said. "One story. What kind of story do you want to hear?" "A true story," the little girl said. "Tell me how you and Grandpa fell in love." So they did. They gathered all the grandchildren who were still awake, and they told the story. Not the whole story, with all its darkness and pain, but the important parts. They told about a cowboy who believed in justice and a woman who had lost hope. They told about a journey to find the truth and a love that grew along the way. They told about second chances and about how sometimes what looks like a second chance is actually the first real chance you have ever had. The children listened with wide eyes, captivated by the tale of their grandparents' romance. And when the story was done, they went to bed happy, secure in the knowledge that they came from love, that their family was built on a foundation of courage and trust and unwavering commitment. Later, much later, when everyone was finally asleep, Sebastian and Delilah lay in their bed in the dark, listening to the familiar night sounds of the ranch. "Do you think the children understood?" Delilah asked. "What we were really saying?" "They will," Sebastian said. "When they are older and facing their own challenges, they will remember that their grandmother was strong enough to survive the worst and brave enough to love again. They will remember that sometimes the best things in life come from the darkest moments." "I hope so," Delilah said. "I hope they never stop fighting for what is right. I hope they never stop believing in second chances." "First chances," Sebastian corrected gently, making her laugh. "First chances," she agreed. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, their hearts beating in sync the way they had for 30 years. And if either of them dreamed, they dreamed of all the years still ahead, all the moments yet to be lived, all the love still to be shared. Because their story was not over. It would never be over, not really. Love like theirs did not end. It continued on in their children and grandchildren, in the school that bore Delilah's passion for learning, in the ranch that reflected Sebastian's dedication and hard work. It continued in every person whose life they touched, every student Delilah taught, every person Sebastian helped as a ranger. This was the gift of that first real chance. Not just a reprieve from death, not just an escape from injustice, but an opportunity to build something lasting and beautiful. An opportunity to prove that even when life seems darkest, even when hope seems lost, there is always the possibility of redemption, of transformation, of love. Years later, when Sebastian and Delilah were both gone, their grandchildren would tell the story to their own children, the tale of how a Texas Ranger walked into a jail and saved a woman's life, not just by proving her innocence, but by loving her completely. The tale of how that woman, who had been beaten down and terrorized and convinced she deserved nothing good, had found the courage to accept that love and build a beautiful life. It became a family legend, passed down through generations. And while the details might have changed slightly with each telling, the heart of the story remained the same. A story about justice and mercy, about the power of believing in someone when they had stopped believing in themselves, about how the right person at the right time can change everything. But most of all, it was a story about love. Real love, the kind that sees all your scars and loves you anyway. The kind that fights for you when you are too tired to fight for yourself. The kind that says, "You deserve better," and then spends a lifetime proving it. That was the legacy of Sebastian and Delilah Foley. Not just the land they left behind or the school that bore Delilah's name, or the reputation Sebastian had built as one of the finest Texas Rangers of his generation. Their real legacy was the example they set, the proof they provided that no matter how dark your past, no matter how hopeless your situation, there is always the possibility of a first real chance. All you have to do is be brave enough to take it.